There's a wonderful world all around you. Get out and see Berlin.
AFN Berlin.
This is Answerline, a twice-monthly presentation of AFN News. It's your chance to call in questions about our Berlin American community. This program is presented live, so your questions can be answered while our guests are on the air. Now, here's your Answerline host, Air Force Sergeant Bedford Z. Vickers.
Good evening, and welcome to Answerline. Our guests tonight are from the Berlin Counseling Center. We have Captain Walter Sutherland with us from the Berlin Counseling Center. He's the Alcohol and Drug Counseling Officer for the Berlin Brigade. And Dr. Jim Jacobs, the Clinical Director of the Berlin Counseling Center. If you'd like to call in any questions to us here at Answerline, our numbers are 819-6028 and 819-7300. And first, I'll leave this open to both of you. What happened to CDAC? I understand that you more or less replaced them.
Okay, our new name is the Berlin Counseling Center. And the change was based on getting rid of some of the stigma that's attached to alcohol and drug abusers themselves. And another reason for the name change has been we are now operating under a new regulation, a new tracking system that we operate under.
Mm-hmm. Now, I also understand there's been some policy changes as far as drug and alcohol abuse is concerned with this new program. Could you explain a little bit of those?
Yes, the new regulation itself now goes into an alcohol program where it mandates that anyone that chooses to drink alcoholic beverages must do so reasonably and set the example for others, and also to create an environment where other people do not feel pressured into drinking alcoholic beverages. There's also a new provision in there handling the cannabis abuse, which is the THC or hashish, and it provides provisions for that. We have a new tracking system. We now operate under 3 tracks, the first track being an education awareness track, and it provides 12 hours of education dealing in alcohol, drug abuse, the consequences and alternatives to those. Track 2 is the counseling portion, and it's an outpatient counseling program for individual and group session counseling, open to military as well as civilian dependents and civilian personnel that work for the military. Track 3 is the residential treatment facility over at the hospital here in Berlin. That is a 6-week course or program, and once that's completed, there's a mandatory follow-up for a full year in the counseling program itself.
Mm-hmm. Now, Dr. Jacobs, I understand that you are primarily involved in the counseling end of
the rehabilitation
system.
side. Yes.
How does that work?
Well, it depends partially on which track that you're in, as the captain was just mentioning. If you are in track 2, which means you're put in the outpatient side of the rehabilitation side of the house, then we would usually see the person individually, maybe once or twice a week would be seen by a counselor over there, and or also that person might be seen in group counseling. If the person was seen in a hospital program, then that person would be inpatient in the residential treatment facility here in the hospital, and then for follow-up we would see that person in kind of your standard drug and alcohol counseling format.
Do you work closely with the hospital in this?
Yes, Yeah, I was just over there just before I came onto this program today.
Now, one of the things that I understand that has been changed with this new program is urinalysis and the way that it's used. How has that been changed?
Okay, basically there was a policy statement that was put out by the Department of Defense that basically dealt with urinalysis and the use of positive results on the urinalysis to be used in either prosecution or legal proceedings. That has not gone into effect. Department of Defense said that that's what they want to do, and for the Department of the Army to actually implement that, they are waiting for a decision that is pending in the courts at this time on the legality of actually using that.
So, but you still do use urinalysis,
yes,
of
we
course.
do.
How do you use that?
Okay, the urinalysis program itself, commanders are authorized up to 3 urinalysis Commander-X each day. The brigade itself has what we call SUTCOs, unit sweeps, where the whole unit can be urinalysis tested for drug abuse. And those personnel that are identified for any type of drug abuse, to include hashish, are now referred to the program and are enrolled in the program based on the commander's decision.
Okay, once again, our numbers are 819-6028 and 819-7300. We have some calls now coming in. The first one, and I'll leave it open to both of you, it says, can a lower-ranked individual turn in, quote-unquote, a higher-ranking individual if he sees him as a problem drinker? How would you deal with that if someone were to call you up and say, I see that maybe my supervisor is a problem drinker?
Okay, if something like that comes to our attention, what we would first do is notify the commander of that individual and let him know that there's either a perception or a possible problem there. And then the commander then would decide on how to handle the problem, either possibly by referring him to us or calling him in and counseling him and seeing if there is a problem, and based on finding out from his personal observation as well as the information he has at hand, make a determination to possibly enroll him in the program.
Okay, and Dr. Jacobs, let's take that one step further. If someone is found to be a problem drinker, what happens to them?
Okay, well, there's several ways that a person could be identified as a problem drinker. And you also have to divide that into military versus civilian categories, because they're handled a little bit differently on that. If a person's identified by self-identification, in other words, they come in and they're military, we would work with that person and their commander in the rehabilitation program. Okay? If, in this particular case, as you were talking about, the supervisor, the commander of this person on the military side, referred this person, then again we work with the commander and the person that's referred on that for the problem, because the commander in the military unit has basically the power to alter that environment for that person, and it also is it's a commander's program in the military. On the civilian side of the house, if that person had a supervisor that had a drinking problem and came to us, we would work through the civilian personnel coordinator. And in that case, well, actually, we probably tell that person to go to their supervisor's supervisor. And that supervisor could refer that civilian supervisor. I get too many supervisors in my sentences
So
here,
in other words,
us.
still you use your chain of command as, or chain of progression of supervisors
Yes,
as you go along. You know, one thing that we were talking about the program a bit earlier, and one thing that you brought up was that this is also allowing for some limited communication on some of these very sensitive subjects, things that can have a very deep impact on your career. How has this changed?
Okay. Guess I get that one, huh? The Army program is basically a manpower conservation program. It's designed at the bottom line to save the Army money, and the research tends to show that it does. And in that, it's taking a look at the military service member as an employee of a large organization. And that employee may be seen to have poor work performance or deteriorating work performance. Then the supervisor, in this case, ultimately the commander, would refer that person into the program. Okay? Then we then have communication with that person's commander on rehabilitation progress, because ultimately the commander is going to make a decision, is this person a success or a failure? The commander can say that work performance is still not very good, that the Army does not need this individual, and basically separate this person from the Army. On the civilian side, we have a little bit more, or rather a little bit less in terms of what we have to do in terms of communication of progress and such. For instance, a dependent spouse of a military member can come in. We don't communicate that to anybody. Mm-hmm. And they come in and we see them for drug or alcohol counseling, and then they go on that. And we don't talk to their commander or their spouse necessarily, although it would be good to have the whole family involved.
Okay, now we have a caller that's called in with a question that's very related to this, and it is what punitive actions would take place if a person were to turn himself in as a habitual drug user.
Okay, as far as punitive action, if he turns himself in, he's seeking to rehabilitate himself, the commander then would refer him over to us. We would do an initial screening of the individual, find out how much of a problem he has, and then recommend to the commander what track to place him into. Once he's in the program, then through the rehabilitative team process, meeting with the commander, the client himself, and the counselor, then there would be a determination of how well he's progressing.
Now, I take it from what you've just said that he must go through he must turn himself into his commander, or should he turn himself into you?
Okay, if he turns himself into us, what we have to do is notify his commander, because the only way he can get in the program is to be enrolled in the program by his commander. However, a person that feels that he does have a problem like that should not fear going to his commander.
Mm-hmm.
If he does have a problem like that, it may be showing up in his work anyway, and the commander may suspect him.
Mm-hmm.
And it's better for him to get the help he needs and get himself back to being a productive soldier than to let it go on.
Would it be possible then for the commander to come back and take action against him, even if he was rehabilitating himself and it showed on his records that he was enrolled?
Okay, I think what the question is trying to get at is the difference between punitive action and administrative action a commander can take. Commander can take certain administrative actions, which he has under his authority, such as extra training in terms of education, pulling past privileges, those type of things. And those are an administrative act that the commander can do, okay? But those are not punitive in nature. Punitive-wise, he cannot take UCMJ action against him or anything like that. Actually reduce him because he has identified himself as a drug abuser.
Mm-hmm. Another question, what becomes of a person who doesn't think of himself as an alcoholic, and it doesn't say this, but I take it that would have been entered into the program. If he's entered into the program and he doesn't think that he's an alcoholic, what?
Okay, remember again, this goes back to the question of it being a commander's program or a manpower conservation program. One problem with alcoholism, if you look at it kind of as a disease type phenomena, is that people who consume a lot of alcohol or who really do have alcoholic problems oftentimes deny that they do, in spite of the fact that they may have 2 or 3 DUIs and their family's falling apart around them and their work performance is down. So the commander or the supervisor has to make a determination, and it may not agree with the service member's determination. A service member may say, I'm drinking 2 6-packs of beer a night and it's not affecting my life, when in fact it is affecting that person's life. Mm-hmm. So they may not feel they have a problem. If in fact they do not have a problem and they're in the program, the counselors, who are very highly qualified in this area, will communicate that to the commander and say, this person doesn't have a problem. If the commander or whoever it is or the supervisor persists in that, will go through me and eventually through Captain Sutherland in terms of the person should not be in the program. Mm-hmm. But there is often a lot of denial in alcoholism, and we see people who say they don't have a problem, and then 2 months later, after they've kind of been in treatment for a while, they say, boy, did I have a problem, and I'm glad you didn't give up on me on it.
And on the other hand, I take it that if someone sees a person as an alcoholic, they must go through the person's commander in order to get him referred to the program if he's not in it.
As we mentioned earlier, if they come to us, we ultimately must go through the commander. So if at all possible, it'd be best to report it up the chain of command to get the guy the help he needs.
Okay. Once again, our numbers are 819-6028 or 819-7300. We have Captain Walter Sutherland, the Berlin Counseling Center, of the Berlin Counseling Center here. He's the Alcohol and Drug Counseling Officer for the Berlin Brigade. Captain Sutherland, what, I'm having a hard time with that. What type of credentials do you bring into your job, being as this is a new program?
Okay, my past qualification, basically, as a company commander, I've worked under the program as a commander, and I understand the problems with the program itself as a commander feels those problems. Since taking over this position, I have gone back to Fort Sam Houston in Texas, and I've attended the course there, the Army course on alcohol and drug training. Mm-hmm. So I have had that as background also.
And Dr. Jacobs?
My training is as a clinical psychologist, and my background has been heavily involved in the field of drug and alcohol abuse, mostly in the area where I was trained was San Diego County, which has some similarities, in fact, to Berlin in terms of drugs that are available there and drugs that are available here.
We have another phone caller that's asking what percentage of the test is accurate. They don't specify what test. I take it it's a urinalysis
Must be
test.
urinalysis test.
Is it 100% accurate or what? And also, if a person is put on the program, what kind of impact does it have on it?
Urinalysis test. If the person is talking about a urinalysis test, it's not 100% accurate, as no test is 100% accurate, I know. But urinalysis testing is tested twice when it's done down at the lab in Wiesbaden, which is where we send all of our testing. It's screened once through one method, and it has to come up positive on that. And then it has to be screened again through another method before it comes up positive to us. And then, even then, when we get it back, we can order a retest. They keep all the material down there to retest if they want. Mm-hmm. And we have occasionally had false positives coming up, but they're very rare. It's more like 1 in 1,000 or 1 in 2,000, something like that. Less than that.
Okay, and if a person is tested and later found to be innocent of being a drug or alcohol abuser, what damages, or doesn't it damage his career? That's what the question says.
Okay. The first thing is, if he comes up urine positive, he must come over and go through the screening process. Part of that process is medical evaluation. And if the person feels that there was some mistake, then we can request a retest if necessary. Prior to the commander actually enrolling him, we will normally have the results back, whether it's positive or not. And then we will make a recommendation to the commander based on that. And normally the commander will not enroll someone unless that screening process has been completed in the first place. If a person does have a positive urinalysis and then it turns out later that there was a lab mistake on it, then it would not have any effect on the person. The commander probably then would, if he was enrolled, would disenroll him based on the fact that he does not have a problem, and there should be no real major problem with it.
Okay, we have one that poses a hypothetical situation. If a spouse is a wife abuser due to alcohol, and the spouse is given the option of either stop drinking or go on the program himself, why would this person be given such an option? I take it someone was.
On that, if it's, well, anybody that has an alcohol or drug-related problem gets referred to us through screening. Now, there are several agencies in Berlin that would handle cases of spouse or child abuse. Notably, the social workers over at the hospital would be kind of the primary people on that. If, however, they determine that alcohol is the main reason this person becomes abusive when they drink, which happens quite a bit, that person might be referred over to us to deal with the underlying problem of spouse abuse being alcohol abuse. The person didn't drink, the person wouldn't abuse the spouse, then of course we would deal with alcohol.
Okay, and we have another phone caller that's asking a question about drug abuse advertisements, saying that taking drugs is painted as a depressing type of situation, where that he says, or she points out that the real reason for taking drugs is to feel good or better than you normally do. Could you explain some of the ideas behind that sort of thing?
I'm not sure I understand the question there, that taking drugs makes you feel good or better than you do.
That's what the caller says that they actually do for you, but the advertisements paint them as being depressing in nature.
Okay, well, that may be, first off, drugs and alcohol, of course, being a drug, often do make people feel better than they do before they take them. However, they may be feeling pretty bad at that point, and they're just knocking out the feeling of badness. It's not injecting them with betterness on that. And it may be, in fact, they need to make changes in their life. Also, the drugs and many of the drugs, I guess, and alcohol included, have very adverse effects on life physically and emotionally. And ultimately, it does lead to some very depressing things. We see a lot of the cases that end up with people feeling not very happy at all.
Mm-hmm.
One other point on that is the fact that the use of drugs is illegal, and unless it's prescribed, the actual use of the drugs itself is illegal and is not to be accepted in the Army.
Okay. One question we have here is when or if large quantities of alcohol are found in a person's blood, for instance, during a routine urinalysis, and I know the urinalysis
Doesn't test for alcohol.
doesn't test for alcohol.
No.
No, it does not.
So it would have to be a blood test.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Must a person go to alcoholic counseling?
Let me kind of extrapolate from that situation. That's usually only done, for instance, if a person comes into the hospital emergency room and they're acting drunk, or if they're in an automobile accident and they're suspected to have been drinking alcohol. Okay. Then if they come up with a blood alcohol test, because it has to be ordered specially in any case, then they would be referred over to us for at least screening. They would not automatically have to be in the program.
Okay, so there would be no way for them to find out on a quote-unquote routine basis.
Not unless they asked for it.
Okay. What is the unit ADAC, and can you explain what it is? The caller says, what's their role, and aren't they also involved in helping individuals?
Okay, the ADC is what it is. It's the Alcohol Drug Coordinator. This is the person that used to be known as the DACE, the Drug and Alcohol Education Specialist. He is basically the commander's representative to run the urinalysis program for him, to keep the records that are required of anyone that's entered into the program. So he has a dual role. He keeps the commander informed on how well things are going. He keeps the paperwork, and he also provides the education in the unit itself for their mandatory training requirements.
Okay, we're rapidly running out of time. We might have a chance to answer just a couple more questions. Will turning yourself in jeopardize your chances for promotion?
No, not purely that. However, if you're turning yourself in because your job performance is down low and people are right on your heels, yes, your promotion will be jeopardized, but not by being in the ADAPSIT program per se.
One more thing on the promotion itself is that promotion cannot be denied solely for the fact that the guy is in the program.
Okay, and sir, one final question. If a person turns up positive on a urinalysis, can he himself demand a retest, or does the decision rest with your organization?
He can request one, and normally we will call down to Wiesbaden and request it. Depending on the actual amount of screening that it has gone through and how many times it's been verified, they will normally run a retest.
Okay, and that's going to have to do it. We've run out of time. Our guests tonight have been Captain Walter Sutherland, the Berlin of the Berlin Counseling Center. He is the Alcohol and Drug Counseling Officer for the Berlin Brigade, and Dr. Jim Jacobs, the Clinical Director of the Berlin Counseling Center. We hope you've enjoyed it. That's Answerline. Have yourself a pleasant evening.
This has been Answerline, a program designed to put you in touch with people in our community whose actions have a definite impact on all of us. Join us the first and third Thursday of each month for Answerline. Answerline, a presentation of AFN News.